Welcome to Soothe Quiet Sleep. I'm so glad you are here. Before we begin our tonight's story, find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. Your shoulders can soften now. Your hands can rest. If your eyes are not already closed, allow them to close gently. Take a slow breath in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. One more time. Breathe in and breathe out. Tonight, we step quietly into the compound of a Tang Dynasty prefectural academy, a school where young men lived and studied within the same enclosing walls. And we follow one long winter day alongside a young scholar, from the morning bell to the quiet hour of the dormitory lamp. The day began before dawn. A wooden handbell rang once across the sleeping compound. Then moved through the cold corridors and reached the dormitory rooms, where the students lay beneath their thick quilts. In the dark, cloth-soled shoes touched cold floor tiles. Breath rose in small pale clouds near the unlit windows. The scholar splashed water on his face from the ceramic bowl beside his sleeping platform. The water was very cold, the cold of stone in deep winter. He pulled his outer robe around him, tucked his hands inside his sleeve, and stepped out into the covered walkway. The courtyard was still dark. Its flagstones were glazed with a fine frost that caught what little remained of the night sky above the compound walls. Along the far edge of the garden, where a stand of bamboo grew beside the low stone walls, the pale stalks stood perfectly motionless, each one holding its stillness in the cold air, the leaves gathered and unmoving. He crossed to join two other students from his corridor. The taller one from the eastern room, who moved with long, quiet strides, and the younger one, who walked with his hands folded inside his sleeves and his eyes still heavy from sleep. Their breath drifted ahead of them in small pale clouds as they made their way toward the hall. The compound was waking slowly from the dark. Before the first light reached the courtyard, the students gathered in the hall reserved for morning observance. They gathered in 2 rows before the altar shelf, where the name of Confucius, whose teaching formed the heart of their learning, was written on a wooden tablet. A single incense stick burned before it, its thread of smoke rising straight and still. The teacher waited on one side. The students bowed once and then again. No words were spoken. The ceremony was in the stillness of it. After the observance came the morning meal. The students walked into the long room beside the kitchen and took their places at the low wooden tables. Gray ceramic bowls, a simple rice broth with pickled vegetables, warmth rising from the clay pot that the kitchen attendant moved between the rows without sound. The smell of the broth filled the room, a thin, clean warmth against the cold air drifting in from the half-open side door. The scholars ate without talking. Outside, the pale winter light spread slowly across the courtyard tiles. The lecture hall stood at the center of the compound. Its wide doors opened to the inner courtyard. The students walked in and took their places on the low cushioned mats, arranged in 2 rows, facing the raised teaching platform at the front. A scroll hung on the wall behind it. A large formal brushwork of characters, steady and even. The opening passage of one of the ancient classics. The teacher began without preamble. His voice was unhurried, reading one line at a time, pausing after each, letting the words settle before continuing. The passage was from the Book of Sounds, the oldest collection of poetry in the classical world. 305 verses composed by ordinary people across many centuries. Farmers and soldiers, wives waiting at the gate, travelers on cold roads at night. The teacher read the same line 3 times slowly. Then he called upon the students to recite. Their voices together filled the hall in a low, even rhythm. The words moving in a pace that rose and fell like breathing. The sound was not loud. It was the sound of something old and patient being carried forward. Outside the lattice windows, the winter light lay flat across the courtyard stones. The morning continued in its long and hurried way. The afternoon session ended as the light was beginning to soften toward the west. The students came out through the hall doors into the covered corridor, their voices low. The day's study quietly settled in the body. The scholar walked with his two companions back across the courtyard. The taller one carrying his sleeve-folded study notes. The younger companion moving with a lighter step. They paused at the edge of the garden without deciding to. The bamboo in the far corner of the compound held its stillness in the winter air. The peeled stalks standing cleanly. The leaves gathered and unmoving against the white sky above the wall. A sparrow briefly landed on the low stone rim of the garden. Paused for a moment, looking across the courtyard, and then flew off. Beyond the outer compound wall, a cart moved on the road outside. The distant creak and grinds of its wheels carrying clearly in the cold air, and then fading. The scholar stood still for a moment. The afternoon light lay flat and silver across the flagstones. The frost had not yet returned, but the cold was resuming as the sun moved lower. The air sharpening again after the soft warmth of the afternoon. Then the three of them moved on towards the evening meal. After the meal, the students returned to the study hall on the eastern side of the compound. It is a timber building of 2.5 stories. The tallest structure on this side of the academy. The ground floor and the first floor each held rows of low wooden study tables, oil lamps already set and burning at each place. Above the first floor, a half-story attic ran the full length of the building beneath the sloping eaves. The academy archive. Its wall lined with orderly rack of books and bound scrolls, cool and dim, smelling of old paper and lacquer wood. Students climbed up there to retrieve a text and sometimes remained to read among the stored writing. A lamp sat on the narrow shelf beside the rack. The scholar took his usual place on the ground floor, near the second lamp from the south window. The hall was warmer than the courtyard. The old timber walls held the day's gathered heat well into the evening. From his cloth bag, he drew out the scroll he has been walking through for the past few days. A passage from the Book of Sounds, copied out by a senior student in clear vertical columns on thick paper. He anchored the scroll edges open with 2 smooth river stones and settled to read, letting the hall gather itself around him. The taller student's footsteps passed through the entrance and continued up the staircase to the first floor. A soft creak on the 3rd step, then quiet as he found his place above. A little later came the lighter sound of the younger student. Climbing the steep attic ladder, a scroll already tucked under his arm. 3 lamps burned in the building, 1 on each level. Each separate pools of amber light, still and even. Each contained within its own floor. Below, the scholar at his text. Above him, the taller student at his table on the first floor. And above that, just audible through the old timber ceiling, the faint sound of the younger student settling quietly among the stored scrolls in the archive attic. Outside, the compound has grown quiet. The kitchen sounds had ended. Somewhere near the rear corridor, a door was drawn gently shut. The winter evening had fully arrived now. The study hall held it, floor by floor, lamp by lamp, warm and close and calm. Some time passed. It was difficult to say how much. The scholar had moved through 3 columns of the passage, pausing where the meaning required it, reading certain lines twice, with his finger tracing just above the surface of the paper. The text he was studying described a river crossing in early autumn. The green reeds, the sound of water, the feeling of distance between 2 shores. He had read it before, several times. Each time, something different came forward. The taller student across the room looked up from his scroll. He murmured a line, quietly, half to himself, from one of the poems they had recited that morning in the lecture hall. It was a verse from the Book of Sounds about winter reeds at dawn. The white dew turned to frost at the river's edge. The scholar listened. After a moment, he said, "A good verse for this evening. No more than that." The taller student's gaze moved briefly to the window. The dark courtyard beyond the lattice. The winter dark. And then he returned to his scroll. The younger student had not looked up, though perhaps he had heard. The room drew back into its quiet. The same quiet as before, perhaps a little softer now, for having opened briefly and closed again. The lamps burned on. The scholar continued through the passage. He read without hurry, giving each line the time it needed. His finger traced slowly to the next column. Across the room, the taller student had grown very still. His head lowered in the posture of deep concentration. The younger student had set his scroll down and was resting his gaze somewhere near the lamp flame. With a slightly unfocused look of a mind gently releasing the hold it had kept on things all day. The lamplight on the nearest table, warm, steady, touching the upper edge of the scroll's paper with its amber glow. The rest of the room receding into the softer dark beyond. From somewhere beyond the outer wall came the night watchman's wooden clapper, a hollow striker beaten twice each hour to mark the time across the sleeping compound. Two soft hollow taps. The sound traveled in the cold air and then was gone. The winter night settled again, even and patient. The lamps kept their quiet flames. The scholar reached the end of the passage. He stayed with the final lines for a moment, not reading, only resting his eyes on the characters as they stood on the page. The verses described the end of a journey. The traveler arriving at evening. The road behind him and the gate ahead. Nothing more complicated than that. He found that satisfying. One of the river stones was returned carefully to the upper edge of the scroll. The room around him was very quiet. The younger student had folded his hands on the table and was sitting with his eyes half closed. Not asleep, but near something like it. The taller student was still reading, his brush tracing lightly over a line in his own text, making a small mark in the margin. The lamp lay along the lower surface of the nearest ceiling beam in a long, even stripe, amber and still. The wood above it, worn to a deep brown from years of seasons in this room. The beam absorbed the light and gave it back softly. The scholar looked at it for some time, still warm. Footsteps sounded once in the corridor outside. The library archive monitor making his evening round. A quiet knock on the door frame. He said only, "A few more minutes." The taller student began to gather his things. His scroll rolled and tied. His notes folded. His lamp carried back to the stand near the door. The younger student rose and straightened his robe, tucking his rolled scroll under his arm. The scholar slowly rolled the scroll close, the paper coming together with its quiet resistance. The columns of characters disappearing inside the roll. He set it in his cloth bag and tied the cord. He lifted his lamp and returned it to the stand. The three of them moved out of the library room into the covered corridor. The cold air found them at once. Their breath rose ahead of them in the lamplight as they crossed towards the dormitory wing. The bamboo in the garden corner stood in the dark, motionless. The flagstones were cold beneath their shoes. Above, the winter sky was clear and cold, white above the grey tiles of the compound walls. In the dormitory, the scholar set his bag on the lower shelf beside his sleeping platform and sat for a moment on the edge of his bed. The room was quiet around him. His two companions came to rest without speaking. Robes folded, shoes set neatly beside the sleeping platform. Quilt lifted and drawn close. In the corner of the dormitory, on its lower shelf, the night lamp burned. Its flame is very small, barely a warm point of light in the quiet room. But it was enough. It reached the nearest timber wall, just touching the old planking with its amber warmth. And it reached the low ceiling beam above. The dark wood receiving the light evenly along its lower face, returning the same patient glow that the study room lamp had offered all evening. Light on old timber, warm and still. Outside the dormitory window, the courtyard lay in deep winter cold. The flagstones were dark. The bamboo stood pale and silent along the garden wall. The frost was returning now to the stone and tile, settling in the way that frost always settles, quietly, without announcing itself, arriving while no one is watching. The compound was entirely at rest. Inside, the small lamp continued its patient burning. The flame held without moving. The beam above was still. The scholar lay down and drew the quilt up close. The lamplight rested on the timber above, amber and even, as it had rested through all the long sessions of this day. From the vesper frost of the morning courtyard to this final quiet hour. It did not require anything of the man lying beneath it. It only burned and spread its warmth and rested on the old wood the way light rests when everything else has gone still. Warm, soft, and still. And the winter night held the compound, patient and cold and unhurried, exactly as it had held it through all the long seasons of the study before this one. And so the young scholar rests in the winter dormitory as the small lamp burns on its shelf. The compound still and cold around him. The day's verses settling quietly into the memory the way frost settles on stone. Gently and without effort, in the patient hours of the night. The world we visited tonight is quiet now, and you are here again, in the comfort of your room. Your mind can rest. Your body can relax. If you are already drifting into sleep, allow yourself to sink deeper. If you are still awake, simply listen to the quiet. Thank you for joining me at Soothe Quiet Sleep. I'll be here again soon to share another peaceful moment in time. But for now, sleep well. Good night.